You've found Aho Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of Aho Radio, John Krotek and Bill Paratzman. Hey, John Krotek. How you doing out there on the left coast of Florida, man?
Well, it is kind of the left coast. I prefer West Coast, but
West Coast will work, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing good here. How about you out there on the West Coast of the U.S.?
It is hot, man. We've got this heat wave, and San Diego Gas and Electric calls up every day and says, we're going to be doing these rolling power outages, which thankfully haven't hit us yet. But yeah, it's hot. There's some fires starting. California is doing what it does, around this time of year, which is intensified by the heat wave. It's been quite a ride. Add that to the how many weeks in COVID lockdown now, and so it's just it's 2020, man. It's this is a year for the books.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Gary Rossio, our guest today on Aho Radio. He's a man that has been in the healthcare industry for probably most of his life, and has been working in and very near with veterans. Started this San Diego Veterans Coalition, which is like a model organization for how we can build bridges in the healthcare industry and with our veteran population. And I know he's doing consulting work now, but we want to dig into the meat of who Gary Rossio is, how he made it into the healthcare industry and what he's done there and what we can do as citizens to demystify the whole healthcare world. Because, Gary and Bill, when people hear the word of healthcare, a lot of people just shut down. They don't understand it. But anyhow, welcome to the show. I know that Bill and I are both thrilled to have you here.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Bill.
Welcome aboard. I've known you now for a while, and I've been so humbled to be, sort of a protege. Gary's been my mentor for on and off for different things, and San Diego Veterans Coalition has been this great place where we actually wound up meeting and working together as colleagues and partners in moving veteran services forward. It's spread out across the country. It's a wonderful thing. And Gary, just all hail, man. Air Force veteran, yay. Off we go into the wild blue yonder together, right?
Yes.
So, Hey, the most authentic guy that I've ever met. Tell me about Gary, the husband and father, because you've got an amazing family, man.
Well, thank you. Been very fortunate and came from a really great family as well. My own father was a B-17 flyer in World War II. And my mother was a stay-at-home mom when they first got married after World War II ended. He came back home. I was born a year after the war ended, 1947, and got that history. I had 13 veterans in my family going back to World War I. Fought in the Italian army against the fascists back in the day, and some of them were resistance fighters, and had uncles in the Air Force. I have 13 veterans. 11 of them were Air Force, 1 Navy, 1 Army. So it's pretty much Air Force family over time. But the interesting thing is just the impact it's been on my life is that the history of our country and my family immigrating from Italy in 1920, 100 years ago, this year actually. And we had planned to have a 100-year anniversary for our family, but COVID knocked that out. Everybody's pretty much in Michigan, but we were going to go back and do that. And then I just also happened to note this morning, today's the 100-year anniversary of women's right to vote. The suffrage movement was August 18th of 1920. So that 100-year anniversary is today, which is a great passage because women did not have the right to vote in the U.S. before that. Now they do, obviously. So it really helped their cause and their equality, and long overdue. But, as I went through, I'm originally from Detroit and grew up in the city, and then went to high school in the suburbs and went to college at Michigan State. And then I actually taught high school for a year and a half, Flint Northern High School. Yes, the Flint that had the water problems. And I taught high school back there. And then I knew my military service was coming. And so the Army was all set to draft me. So I beat the draft by joining the Air Force. So I went to the Air Force. Spent 4 years, and actually that's how I got into healthcare because I took the Air Force qualifying test and I scored high in administration, which surprised me and everybody else. And most don't think I have much administrative talent these days, but Air Force thought I did. So they put me into medical administration service, and I was a little unusual. I was E4 with a master's degree. So a little interesting time, but I learned healthcare from literally the ground up. I mean, the only people started below the hospital, below me, were the plumbers, and they were important people. But I learned how the hospital works from the first step in the door all the way to being a CEO and now doing consulting and volunteer work. So I've kind of been the course over almost 50 years now.
That's a,
you're so humble about it, man. Just for the record, because when I met Gary, he'd kind of just retired from his last job, which was running the San Diego VA healthcare system. Is the CEO of a giant hospital, you guys.
Right.
How many patients do we have through there every year? It's like massive.
It's now 90,000 or so. When I first got there in '89, it was about 25,000. So it really grew over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
That's a great story. I want to back up a little bit because your history is significant. Your story resonates with so many Americans. And, my dad and his brothers all served in the military as well. And, I had a uncle who was a tail gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress who did all their missions, and another one that was the the window gunner on B-17.
Okay. Waist gunner,
And then we were Croats. My dad grew up in Pittsburgh, and we also had resistance fighters to the fascists in Yugoslavia at that time. And so, those roots, I'm an Army veteran, and those roots, Gary, run deep. And it's an interesting time in our country right now. And I'm so glad that you brought up suffragette, the suffrage movement and what's going on with that. It's been 100 years. And, we hear a lot about American intolerance, but quite honestly, I think America is probably the most tolerant country in the world.
Yeah, I think if you look back at the changes that have gone on in our own country, we're, right now there's a lot of protests going on. We even tolerate that to a point, maybe too much, frankly, but on the one hand, but people do have a right to say what they think. And that's one of the things unique about America compared to other countries.
Absolutely right. So, your foundation is so firm, which gives us insight into, how you approached the job that you did in healthcare. And to go, E4 to be with a master's degree, Bill spelled it out, that's humility. And, to be an enlisted person with a degree, an advanced degree, says an awful lot about your humility, and definitely appreciate that. And it shows that you care more about the mission than about the position. And so that's gratifying to see that, and makes the organizations that you've worked with that much better. So tell us what was going on in San Diego and the impact that you've been able to have your organization in that area of the country.
Well, I think you said it before, and Bill was our past treasurer of SDVC, and he was one of the helping co-founders of us back in 2009 and 10 when we really got this going. And a company out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, actually came out and said, we need to see how we can make an improvement in veteran service delivery, connecting the community and all the people, all the entities that take care of veterans into a safety net through which veterans and families don't fall. And they'd known San Diego had a long-term history of working collaboratively. And where it actually started for me was in 2008, I was asked by the director of Veterans Benefits for the state of California to come to Sacramento and say, how is it that San Diego created this cohesive veterans community? And I said, well, no one's ever written a history of it. So I got with some people, we wrote a history. I went up to Sacramento, delivered the product, did a PowerPoint presentation, and forgot about it. I said, this is what we do in San Diego. I worked all over California, it works there. Just do what you want to do statewide if you can. So a year later, that same person had retired from the state, and I had retired from the VA, and he had helped this company, Altarum Institute, back in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they wanted to do this collaboration building. And they said they wanted to hire me to help actually get this going. So since I knew, where all the players were in San Diego, so I worked for them for 2 years here. Last 9 years have been all volunteer. But, the idea was to get people, in the same mentality, work in collaboration, so that they would create a seamless transition, because the needs of veterans' families are infinite and the resources to treat the needs are finite. So the idea is, how can we take the finite needs and match them to the infinite needs and let's get a safety net, a no wrong door concept, and then create this improved delivery to patients, because San Diego County's got 125,000 active duty, 275,000 veterans. That's 350,000 people out of a population of 3.3 million. And yet they all have a spouse and a couple of kids. And so almost literally add it all together, and about 1/3 of the population here in San Diego, I have directly been serving or connected with the military in some way, shape, or form. And so there's still a lot of unmet needs and a lot of unconnected veteran patients. And the idea was to connect them to an entity that could get them help.
Hey, Gary,
Wow,
you've said this so many times, and it's really sunk in for me that we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Right.
And that ethos is really a challenging one for a lot of people right now who want to fix things and get it done and whatever. How did you come to be comfortable with that?
Well, I think the idea of it is that you make progress over time. It's not a race. It's a marathon. And we got people that we went to originally that said, "You want to do what? You want us to work with who? Are you kidding me? Stay in your own lane. We got our lane over here. Become a 501c3. We might consider talking to you." And they were threatened because they thought that collaborating with somebody else to do the business they did would put them out of business. And for the record, and to a fact, in the 11 years we've been doing this now, no one has collaborated, has gone out of business. In fact, it's usually the opposite. People get more business because they have a collaborative partner to work with, and they realize that we're all in this thing together. And so the result of it is that people have now reached out, extended to each other. And so we went from 6 people in a room, 3 on a telephone, to 160 some partners in a 501c3 that is, we've got our bumps and we've got our blips. Things don't work perfectly, but the idea is we keep pushing forward, and we've made a lot of progress. And so we have helped a lot of patients through this. Everybody that's in a coalition is basically a care provider in some way, shape, or form. And I've done the count. Bill's heard me do it, but in a standard general meeting of our coalition, which is once a month, we'll have 57 to 65 different veteran serving entities in the room. So we'll have people that provide health care, provide moving services, financial loan. We even have the IRS belongs to the coalition. They help us during tax season, if you can believe that. And they're a vibrant member of their group. They show up and they talk, and during tax season they help us. Veterans get their IRS forms done. So we've got a real cross section of the community here working. So it's been effective because we've continued to have dialogue and keep moving the ball forward.
Do you see that? One more, John, because I want to follow this up. Do you see our model in the coalition sort of helping to influence the county response to COVID?
Yeah, because they asked us initially, because we have such a connection to the veterans community, and the veterans community is such a big part of San Diego County. They asked us to be at the table when they had the weekly COVID calls. In fact, right now, Ron Stark and Maurice Wilson and Ray Flores are now pretty much taking over the weekly county calls. I think they moved them every 2 weeks now because COVID's kind of run the pattern is kind of established now. But now the SDVC membership is now leading the COVID population call for veterans every other Thursday.
That's some phenomenal work that you guys and gals out there have done with your organization. And, it's a monumental task, especially when you have that scarcity mentality that's out there. And, I've worked with nonprofits as well. And there is that, I got to get mine, I got to keep mine. And if there's any new kid on the block, there is a fear factor there. And so, looking at it from 50,000 feet, you've mentioned a couple of things: community and collaboration, which are outreaches of leadership. What do you look for? What is your approach to leadership, Gary? And how do you think that's integral to the survival of any organization?
Well, I mean, one of the basic things is that every interaction counts. So when you make a phone call or you have an email or you have a dialogue like this we're having today, it impacts somebody some kind of way. So you got to pay attention to be on point, professional, and doing the right thing. That's one sort of step. I think the next step is do the next right thing after you've done the first one. So it's a little bit hard to carry on sometimes because it gets frustrating that We're doing this as volunteers. We don't have a chain of command. We don't have line authority. You can't fire somebody for not doing their job. You just have to cajole them into continuing to want to cooperate. And so it takes a lot of endurance to want to keep pushing this envelope, but we're doing it, and the people collectively have gotten the spirit of it. I mean, people like Bill have stepped in. You know, they put skin in the game. You know, actually take the time out of their own schedules to do this, and so the result is that they're committed to the mission. And I think if you keep doing that long enough, people will eventually get on board.
So there you go. You know, commitment, community, collaboration. Gary, can you think of one or two veterans or veteran families that your organization has helped, that you can give us a success story of how perseverance, you know, how it works?
Yeah, you know, a good example, I live in Poway, which is just on the edge of San Diego. It's only a couple miles from the edge of the city of San Diego. We have a group called the Poway Veterans Organization that formed up in the last 5 years or so. And they're a bunch of retired military guys and some just regular veterans who didn't spend 20 years. And what they do is they go around to somebody's house and they'll repair a house for them. They'll fix up a front porch. They'll, repair a roof. They'll do things like that to give people who've got, you know, financial issues, that are elderly, that can't do it themselves. They'll give them the literally the labor and the wood and supplies type support to keep their home intact. As one example, we've seen that happen more than one time. And then we have Hannah Mullins, who Bill Walt knows, who runs the Helping Paws programs, the companion therapy program with dogs, providing animals to veterans with PTS that have literally saved lives. I mean, these animals are unconditional lovers, you know, and they give and they give. And so Hannah's helped match up animals, canines especially, to needy vets, and that's helped them step off the ledge versus committing suicide sometimes. And she's got some stories like that. And we've got a group, Tony Teravena's group, the Support the Enlisted Project, STEP, S-T-E-P, Support the Enlisted Project. And they've been doing food drives now for 5 months, once a week or so, to give veteran families, but and active duty families too, the active duty working poor, so to speak, the young enlisted people that don't have much money and, you know, a couple of kids. And so Tony's led the STEP program and getting them food. So, I mean, we can go on this way for a long time, because
that's
there's
awesome.
People out helping every day.
Awesome. You know, how important, you know, this is probably a question it's not a ridiculous question, but how important is the personal touch to the healthcare industry? Because, you know, a lot of people that go in for treatment, Gary, sometimes they feel like just a number. You know, I hear it from so many veterans, you know, that are working directly with the VA or some other veteran outreach program. You know, can you talk a little bit about personal touch in the healthcare industry?
Sure. And you know, you can't lead electronically. I mean, you got to have a hands-on approach at some point. And healthcare delivery is all about the interpersonal relationships. And if you treat your patients well, and I mean, starting from the first phone call, from the first person in the parking lot that greets them when they come into the hospital, from the front desk to the clerk, to the nurse, to the doctor, to the surgeon, or wherever it's going to be, if all those people have it in their spirit to keep that positive attitude toward the patients, everything goes well. I mean, patients are coming in, they're the ones that have the problem. They're the ones that are sick. They're the ones that need help. And what you said earlier on, John, about patients not understanding healthcare, you know, all the words, all the language, all the alphabets that the providers use about ectomy and estomy and ostomy and all that stuff scares the hell out of people. So you got to break it down in human terms, make it understandable. And by doing that, people have a much more, they're in a discomfortable zone to begin with, but they get more comfortable in a discomfortable zone if they get people who treat them like human beings and as a client, as a patient, not a number. And the VA, we've worked on that at the VA going back 30 some years. The VA's got really good customer satisfaction scores right now as a system. Had some good scores too back in 2014 until the Phoenix thing happened. That was bogus, but you know, the media got it and it went crazy on that.
Yeah.
Been a lot of changes still. I get all my health care at the VA, and Bill knows I've had both knees replaced, one hip, and I'm about to have another surgery in September on a hockey injury for my shoulder. But I'm a hockey player, among other things that I do.
Awesome.
But, you know, so I'm going to get that done. But the VA's done a really good job of trying to do telehealth, for example. I'm going to have a physical next week and be virtual, you know, on a video screen just like this. And the VA has been doing telehealth now for more than 20 years. So The industry is catching on, and it's really timely that when COVID hit, there was already an answer, i.e. telehealth, for the non-emergency issues that have come up. And I think now that people are getting used to this idea, eventually they'll look forward to getting back, seeing their care provider face to face. But you got to do what you got to do during the crisis. So we're doing it. And that's where the coalition, we've been doing all of our meetings via Zoom the last 5 months. So, you kind of lose something in the translation, but it's better than not having it at all. So we're trying to make the best of a tough situation.
Hey, Gary, when you first started, like at the VA healthcare system, did you find that you were one of the people who had the vision for what it would look like in 20 years? Or were you just sort of towing the line to see what would happen? I mean, when did that visionary stuff you talked about with the coalition kind of kick in for you?
That's funny. You just asked that question because I was in the VA about 4 months. I just left the military and I was about to quit the VA in 4 months. I said, you know what? If this is all I'm going to do for the next 20 years, I'm going to be outside the system. Then I said, well, I can either complain about it from the outside or I can stay inside the system and try and fix it from within. So I decided I'd outlast all these yahoos that were running the VA back in 1975 and 76. Good people, but very, very, very bureaucratic. And so I just stayed with the process and stayed inside the system, tried to make changes where I could, which was often. And I came to the middle management ranks. I was a medical administration service intern in 1975 and 76 in Ann Arbor, Michigan, actually. And I went to Muskogee, Oklahoma, and then I was there for 2 years. I went to New Orleans for a year, went to Northern California for 3 years, and became an assistant department chief. And then I became a department chief in Iowa City, Iowa. And I was there for 4.5 years, and then went a lateral to Loma Linda University, Loma Linda VA Medical Center, and then got into the associate director training program. I trained at West Los Angeles VA to be an associate director. Then I went to Toma, Wisconsin for 2 years as associate director there. And I came to San Diego the first time I was here for 5 years as associate director of San Diego. And then the VA didn't promote from within back in those days. So even though I was acting director for the hospital for 9 months, they said, well, you got to go away to come back. So I went all the way to Northampton, Massachusetts for 2 years as director of Northampton VA, and then came back to San Diego in 1996, been here ever since. So that's 10 hospitals, 7 states. My wife's from Kansas. I'm from Michigan. We had a daughter born in Iowa, son born in Wisconsin, 2 San Diego natives, and we're like America's family here. So yeah. It's been interesting, but I think the whole time my vision of it was that we've got to do what the private sector does in terms of trying to run this like a business, even though it's the government. So when you do those things, you find out what works for the clients. You ask the patients the questions: how can we better serve you? What do we need to do better to be a better provider of service? And then try and drive that attitude through all the staff that you have. That means every carpenter, every plumber, every doctor, every surgeon, psychiatrist, every nursing assistant, everybody that's on board is there for one purpose only, which is to take care of patients.
Yeah, that's a phenomenal career and a phenomenal progression. I like the way, all those various states, all those different hospitals, amazing amount of knowledge, a wealth of knowledge, and I know you're doing consulting work, Gary. Gary Rossio as the consultant, what is it that you bring besides all that wealth of knowledge? What can you bring to an organization that may be looking for a consultant like yourself?
Well, I start off by asking a lot of questions. Where are you now? I do a little background search, just like you all did on me. I'm trying to find out what the organization's ethos is, what they look like electronically. That's easy to do. That's the easiest part of it now. But you start talking to leadership. You say, what do you want? Because what do you need? Here's what I see. Here's what I think you need. What do you think you need? And try to get to some consensus about where this is going to go, because I want to be a consultant that's going to make a difference. I'm not just there to collect money. And the idea is I want to improve the process some way. And so if we can figure out where we need to get to and what the steps are, if you can figure out the goal, most of the time the steps to me are pretty simple. But it's that they want somebody to come in who's not them, to give them a perspective that's fresh. And that's what I can bring to the table. Say, you do this really well, but have you thought about this? And have you done this? Have you tried this? You come up with something new, because, you know, most businesses, if they can make a 4% profit per year, that's a pretty good number. But a lot of businesses don't make that kind of level profits. They're just breaking even. I've worked in 7, 8 different companies over time, different kind, from for-profit to not-for-profit to volunteer organizations. I've worked in religious organizations, worked in businesses and in the government, different kinds of things. I only did one VA job in 11 years now, and the rest of it's been every place else. So I found that what I've done is transferable, is translatable to the outside universe. And most of the time people go, boy, this is really helpful. So I've been able to, you know, gain steady work that way. I've kind of turned it down most of the last couple of years because I have 2 grandkids and got a couple of grand dogs to be running through here in a minute. But you know, things have been busy, but I enjoy the coalition work a lot. It's been very helpful, and it, you know, it's a good sense of purpose.
Gary, one of the things I love about you is your commitment to family, and you've had the same kind of career that a lot of people, career military people have. You move all over the place and you take the next job because that's the next promotion. How is it that you've managed to translate that incredible family spirit that you have into the world of what you do? But more importantly, what would you say to families who are struggling right now and have that vision but are just, you know, on the edge day to day?
Well, I think they have to know what their own mission is, what their roles are. I think every family's got a mission, got a role, has a reason to be, has a reason to make a difference. So the question is going to be, what is it? And, you know, it starts with the dad, the mom, starts with and there's a lot of blended families out there. I realize that. So the question is going to be is that, and whether it's blended family or nuclear family, or, you know, one with grandparents involved or not grandparents involved, how is it you can pull together and make a collective difference in your society?
I know that
Yeah.
comes from a deep place of faith for you because I know you this way, and whether or not you have a faith or a guiding religious principle, um, what kind of like belief system animates Gary Rossio down at the core? I mean, we've talked about stoicism and all kinds of things and post-traumatic growth, and I know there's a lot in there that I want to try to unpack here.
Yeah. Well, I think the I think it's the desire to make a difference, a positive difference.
Yeah.
It seems that when all the issues that come up with people, they can't figure a way out of it, and there usually is. Sometimes it's tough. I think it's important to have a faith life. I have one, strong, and makes a difference. But
Yeah.
I think ultimately it comes down to what you do with the faith life that you have and the choices that you make.
Yeah, you know,
So
Gary, you know, I love the fact that you say that, because we hear a lot of blame, we see a lot of finger pointing, and what you said is so very important. The desire, a spiritual foundation, and then the ability to make a choice. And when people realize they have that ability, the choices that they make, we hope and pray, are choices that are right to make things better. Your life is it is a, you show, your foundation is what you show. And it couldn't come across more clear. And those concepts are fairly simple: choice and a desire to make things better. So I commend you on that, because in today's day and age, with all the places you've worked and the hundreds of people that you have come into contact with, not everybody thinks the same way as Gary Rossio. So I got to tell you, man, it is refreshing, and it's nice to know that there's guys like you out there in healthcare. Just got to put that in there. So that personal mantra means a lot.
I went to a class several years ago, and it really helped me. It said, here, what are the 10 most important 2-letter words in the world?
Ah,
If it is to be, it's up to me. Okay. So That's 10 words. They're all 2 letters, and it indicates choice, and it indicates making a difference. I support that with Faith Life. That's the formula right there.
Yeah, if it is to be, it's up to me.
Right.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And you know, a lot of people don't realize there are choices out there when they make them, because by doing nothing, that's a choice too. So you have to sort of be. That's where I think Bill and I have this agreement about. You know, we talk a lot about resiliency and about growth from trauma and post-traumatic stress and all the stuff that comes out of obstacles. Bill turned me on to this Ryan Holiday book. You know, the obstacle is a thing, and the idea is you get resilience by overcoming obstacles. So it's all about that. I mean, no one goes through life without some kind of trauma, some kind of stress, some kind of, whether it's military service or combat trauma or a car wreck or accident or loss of a job or tornadoes or hurricanes or floods or whatever it is. Everybody's got some of that. So the question really isn't about what you have, it's what you do with what you have. So
absolutely.
So that's why what you guys are doing through this radio podcast, I mean, you're giving people the opportunity to understand that they have a choice, even when it doesn't seem like they do, because they always do. The question really then is, what do you do with the choice that you have? Even if it's a bad one, you still have a choice to make out there. You can have some control of your own destiny to a point. And if you can't, bad things happen, unfortunate things happen. Then the question is, how do you rebound from it? And how long will it take? And, you know, the more times you get knocked down, the most important thing is how many times you get back up.
True.
That's really well said, because Bill and I were talking the other day that, you know, this higher consciousness is not an inoculation for pain and suffering. And what you point out, Gary, is that as humans, all of us are going to confront those things at one time or another. And it's so empowering for you to say those things, because it allows people to know that they do have a choice, and that they are in somewhat control of their own destinies. And if they have this intent and this desire that you talk about, there's no way that they can't find a certain amount of success and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you don't think you make a difference, this is the issue with suicide. Bill and I have had this conversation before about veterans and their own suicide issues, that everybody's valuable. They can make a difference to somebody. And it's when people lose hope that they're valuable, that this suicide option becomes an option. Because if they realize that they're valuable and that they make a difference to somebody in every day, then they'll not, when they're at the choice point, and I mean the point of inflection where they have the gun and they're in the car and they got the bullets and they're by themselves, if they can choose for life, they'll make it. If they have no hope and they're not felt valuable, then they may take that option. And, you know, unfortunately, there's a suicide epidemic in the country beside veterans. Veteran suicide is a big issue, but suicide epidemic is also, you know, it's several different fold higher than it was 15 years ago. And the highest population group now is the over 80 group, because they feel like, well, all my friends are gone. My wife's spouse is gone. Who cares about me? If family's not around to tell them they're important, then they may take that option. So what we're trying to do in fact, this is Suicide Prevention Month coming up in September. So we're going to have, with the VA, we're going to have a suicide prevention summit and try and, you know, San Diego is rich with resources. There are resources, healthcare providers every place. I mean, we have got for-profit, nonprofit, VA is huge, and all sorts of other entities out there providing the service. But the trouble is getting them to veterans at the just-in-time point so that they know how to use it when they need it. And so that's what Bill and I have been working through I chair the Physical and Emotional Health Committee of the Coalition, which is one of our action groups, in addition to being on the board and being a co-founder of it. But the idea of it is to try and make our clients, who are people who touch veterans every day, aware of what resources are out there for veterans that they can pass on at the point in time the veterans need to have it.
You know, we should talk about suicide just a bit, because it's such, as you pointed out, Gary, this epidemic nationwide. When I stood in that dark place, I thought that suicide was an option. Since then, I've started to realize that it's kind of our job to stand in that dark place, to do the shadow work, as they call it, or to dive deep, or take the hero's journey, to lots of metaphors for it. But being willing to stand in that dark place is something that I see veterans leading on that, because that's basically your job, especially if you've been in combat, man. You've been in that dark place, and you know that your job is to do what needs to be done to get through to the next thing. I don't think it's possible to prevent people from going to that dark place, but I think we could do a better job of offering them a pathway through it.
Right.
Like you mentioned, Ryan Holiday, Obstacles the Way. What are we doing to offer that pathway that says, hey, it's okay to go there, and here's how you can go through?
Right. And so you've heard me say before, Bill, but I picked this up in a real odd place one time talking about stress management, which is that it's okay to think about suicide, but you don't have to act on it. And so to give people the choices of options, saying it's okay to think about it, but you don't have to carry it out. You don't have to act on it. That's when you want to be able to do mental health first aid, QPR program, question, persuade, refer.
Yeah.
And, almost everybody has this feeling that if they've known somebody who's committed suicide, most all of us have known somebody well who's committed suicide. What were the signs that I missed? What could I have done differently? And so there's like a survivor's remorse or guilt because they've known people who've committed suicide. Say, what did I miss? Well, how did I not see this? Well, the people have to be a lot more sensitive to each other and aware that some people are depressed and they covered up with, smiling face and a lot of laughter, but they're really down deep, pretty unhappy, and do the reach out to try and get them to say, you're a valuable person. Let's deal with your mental health issue. There's been a stigma about mental health support for a long time. We got to destigmatize that. I think it's getting lesser so these days, but I think it's still a matter of it's an ongoing issue. It's just not going to go away. And John mentioned before about the depersonalization, about treating people like a number. That is the thing we got to get away from the most, because everybody's got a reason to be there. And so the idea then is, how do we help them get to their next best level and make the choices for life, not death? So all of us got a responsibility in it, but it's a hard sell, but it's doable.
Yeah, it's great responsibility on all of us. And, and it is education.
Right.
I'm living proof. I'm the guy that made the suicide hotline in 2016 and, going through a really rough time in my life, and reached out, and they, I got to tell you, Gary, they literally talked me off the ledge. I kid you not. Got me into several months of cognitive behavioral therapy, also some CBD treatment. And, and you're so right. Everybody out there, most people out there do have a connection. If it's not in their family, it's a close buddy. I lost a really close friend this year who died in a VA facility up in Atlanta, who was, 7 combat deployments, special forces guy, was struggling for the last 3 years. We tried to get him some help, took him to Canada a year before last, and just succumbed. And he had an acute cardiac arrest, but was brought on by he was a young man, 32 years old, that was brought on by the stresses of post-traumatic stress. And it broke all of our hearts. And I can't say enough about how the work that you're doing is exactly what we need. And you're a frontline innovative warrior who gets it and understands the role of healthcare. But what I like what you're doing, Gary, is the human touch. I can pick it up on everything that you're saying and doing, is bringing that old-fashioned behavior to healthcare, which is being truly concerned for the patients. And that is again, another breath of fresh air to hear this in the 21st century digital age. So thank you for that. And I hope the people that are listening that are in healthcare can pick up on Gary's 30 plus years of experience in the healthcare industry. He walks away from that with something that's very valuable.
Thank you, John. One of the things I was going to say a second ago, and just kind of reminded me about this, was just the role that every person can make a difference, because I think it does come down to what you do one-to-one. And I think in a society that's become increasingly remote, everybody wants a quick fix, microwave meals, instant messaging, all this stuff. It's created more barriers than it has taken down barriers. I mean, we can do a reach out like this through a podcast, which is really helpful. but ultimately it still comes down to that person getting someone that makes them feel like they're important. And if they do that, then they're willing to continue to ride through the bad times and enjoy the good times that are there for people. I mean, the idea in life isn't just to survive, it's to thrive. You want to thrive in life. How do you do that? How do you do that?
You have been like the living model for me in this. Sorry about the sun, everybody, but it comes over the trees and lights me out. Hockey player, you lead like yoga exercises. How many weeks after your first hip replacement or knee replacement was that?
First one was about 6.5 weeks.
So, and this is like real life. You can watch this happening in the coalition meetings, but there's something more behind that, of course. And Authentic Human Outliers Radio is all about living your vulnerability, like leading from that place of empathy and compassion. And you've obviously brought a lot of that authenticity to our interview this morning, Gary. What is it that lets you be that person, that real, in spite of, I'll just say it, in spite of the odds,
I guess I'm real stubborn.
Yeah.
So the idea is to keep pushing through. And excuse me, in hockey terms, I'm a grinder. And one of the guys said to me one time, one of our engineers, it was all about sophistication and formulas and let's get slide rule out and make a difference in people's lives. I'm saying, you know what? This is like a hockey game. You go get the puck out of the corner, get it to the front of the net, and somebody puts it in the net. It's that simple. It's not rocket science. Yeah, I mean, there's sophistication behind it, and you got to have all the bells and whistles, and there's all the surgeries and all the stuff that has to be done. I get all of that. I've been through it myself. But the idea of it really is, how can you take what God designed, make it better? It's
iterative.
It couldn't be any more simpler than that. And and we've touched upon a lot of issues here. One of them is this technology. And, we're able to have this podcast, we're able to have these visuals and see each other. And you stressed it more than once, the human touch. And we seem to have separated and isolated ourselves, even more so with COVID, into this world of our own. And I think that what you pointed out, Gary, how important it is for us to stay, if we're in a leadership position, to lead by example, but also to take time out of our days to really appreciate each other and perhaps make contact with those, not only in our families, which you've done and pointed out, but to those in our immediate area of concern. It can still be done, from what I'm hearing, from what you're telling us.
Well, you have to work at it. I mean, it's something you have to value, and then where you put your values, where you put your time, where you put your time is where you put your life. So if your family matters to you, you put the time in your family. And if making money and fancy cars, if that's where you're going to put your time, that's where you put your life. So the reality of it is that you got choices to make. It comes back to making choices all the time. And it's, if you got to put your priorities, to be authentic, you got to put your priorities and your time in alignment. And so that's the key to it, to me. And there's a great thing about simplicity. Occam's razor. I mean, the idea is usually the simplest answer is the right one. And so I always like the Einstein quote, most people miss opportunity because it is dressed in bib overalls and looks like work. So,
yeah, the proverbial word work. And work takes perseverance, and it takes due diligence and resiliency that you touched upon. And I it's funny you say that, because I read a quote that the path to success is littered with the stones of failures. Yeah. And if we can recognize that and realize that we could be having a bad day, it doesn't mean an hour from now that it's not better, or tomorrow is going to be a better day. And so it's important for us to empower ourselves with those types of beliefs. And guys like you, Gary, and Bill mentioned it, that you're a mentor to him. Guys like you are the throwbacks of the age. Guys that have foundations in real things that matter. And again, that's what Authentic Outliers is all about. You know, telling the stories of men and women who take it back to simple terms, back when things meant something, and the things that you have done in your life. I got to tell you, Gary, straight up, brother, they mean something. And the lives that you have touched in the 10 hospitals or 10 hospitals, 7 states, the lives that you have touched, people littered across America. I don't want to say littered, but people across America, people that you probably don't even know, has made the United States of America and their lives a better place. And that's a testament, man. That's a testament to your Italian ancestors and to that indomitable will of people who come to America looking for something that's much bigger than themselves. And you, my dear friend, are a living testimony of that type of human being. And it's just, I say this to Bill all the time. When I go to sleep at night, I go to bed before you guys do, but when the sun goes down on California, I know we're in a good place because of people like Bill and you. Just got to say that.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. It's very nice of you to do that. Yeah, you don't have to say those things, John. I appreciate you saying.
I mean it though. I mean it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, so when you guys, let me ask you guys a question. You're going to ask me. So when you came up with this idea, how do you go about finding your subjects, Avery? I know you've had a couple people from the coalition on already. How do you go about finding your subjects?
Well, Bill finds them and I find them. And what we look for, great question, by the way, what we look for are people. We're hearing more and more of this, Gary, that people are not being heard or they would like to tell their story because there is a culture out there. There is a status quo. And it's almost like the law of attraction that we've read so much about, but it's a God thing. They come into our sphere of influence, and Bill's known some folks, and we just want the people like yourself to come on and to feel totally at ease and comfortable and to be who they really are. Because so often we meet people that aren't being who they really are. And for many times it's because of the culture that we've set up. We've met more introverts on this show than we've ever dreamed we would ever meet. Not everybody out there is an extrovert. And the introverts are just as important as the extroverts. And it's anyhow, I don't know if that answers your question, but we find them. I would say that the universe brings people like you to us.
Okay.
Yeah. It's sort of, like it's people who self-identify. Once you stop working for a living and you realize that volunteering is something that you can do, you kind of volunteer what's in your heart.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me, and John's been a witness to this too, is that people sort of say, I want to talk about something that's close to me. Not so much what I've done in my career and all that, but I want to talk about what's really inside and what makes all that possible. And you said it so well. It's how you spend your time. Like your time is where your heart is, And we've been really blessed. I mean, John, back me up on this, but have we had some amazing guests or what? I mean, it's like that. You wave the flag and people come around.
I'm blown away by the honesty and the candor and the jobs that people have done in their professional careers that, eclipse some of the things that people do. And I know what's cool about you, Gary, is that that's not the reason you do it. So and that makes it even better. And a lot of people that we've had on the show feel the same way. How can they find out more about you, Gary? If somebody's interested, they're here at this portion of the show, and I know that Bill does a great job with the show notes. How can they get a hold of you, man? Where do they find Gary Rossio?
Yeah, well, I'm several pages on on Google. If you do a Google search, I've got pages and pages on me on there, and you can get me through Bill or you. I mean, GaryRossio@gmail.com. Pretty simple. And Bill's got my telephone number, and I get contacts from all over the place. In fact, that's one thing that's been unique about the coalition, because we've been to Dallas. We did 10 coalitions like this in the state of Michigan. We've had contacts from all over the country about how we did what we did and what you do to do this. And so that's been over the last 11 years. And most of it has not been for pay. It's just been they want to know, and we kind of give them the information. It's not a secret sauce. I mean, you have to get out there and know your community and then be a difference, make a difference to somebody. So that's the start of it. And so, anybody that reaches out to me, I'll respond to them. I don't mind if they ask a question, as long as I don't mind how I answer them, sometimes, because
be careful what you ask.
They're looking for money, and we don't have any money, but we do have a lot of dialogue, and we're trying to get some money to make the coalition stronger. But the idea really of it is getting the community spirit going and building a coalition that'll stand the test of time. And I think 11 years is a pretty good run so far, and we're still going strong.
You said something that I hadn't really recognized that way, Gary, which is the dialogue. And do we ever need a way to model good dialogue these days?
Oh man, that's the best question you asked so far, because to me, people got to figure out how to talk to each other. You got to get away from these electronic back and forth. Pick up a telephone. Still my favorite medium of transmission of information. If I can't see you face to face, I just talk to you over the phone. And to learn how to have a conversation. I said to somebody the other day, confrontation is a form of support. You got to be able, if people are in a bad place, you got to say, look, pal, you're in the wrong place. And
you couldn't have said it better, because, you go out to lunch and you'll see 6 people at a business lunch and they're all on their phones.
Yeah.
and there's no dialogue taking place. Gary, you couldn't have said it better, because that is the human element that we've talked about. Conversation and be willing to listen.
Right.
To what people have to say. But all I can say is that, I appreciate your time here with Bill and I today, and you're doing phenomenal work. I know if I come to the West Coast, I'm going to search you out. So
okay. Look forward to it.
Love to see you in person. And Bill, thanks for bringing Gary on today. It was really awesome.
Oh, you bet. Hey, Gary, stick around after the outro so we can say a proper thank you to you. We'll do the automatic one as we go out here. But love to chat if you've got a couple more minutes, just to
sure.
Kind of do the less public version of our thanks and gratitude for you. But let me join John in saying thanks as well. You've been an amazing influence in my life, my friend, and I'm joining the thousands of other people that you've touched throughout your career, just with such humble praise. It's been a complete honor to be a part of the coalition and to work together and to see things go like the way they have. And okay, so I could go on for a while like this.
Yep.
But
Bill, thanks.
Thank you, Gary, truly. And John, thank you for taking time out of your day. This thing we do on Aho, it's just a whole lot of fun, and I'm thrilled to be here and doing this with you, brother. That's John Krotek, everybody.
Likewise, Bill Protzman, Gary Rossio. He's not done yet.
Yep. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Aho Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the Aho Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. Aho.
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 There you go.